Welcome, low ego action heroes. This is Debbie Levitt from DeltaCX.com. We're a full service CX and UX agency. If you need us for something, please hire us to do that. And today is episode 137. It's our third in a series of kind of day in the life and realities of UX work. And thanks to everybody joining. Hello to Charlene. Charlene is our deputy. If there's any trolls today, she will squash them. I've given her the power. So we're going to be joined by some friends of the show today who graciously agreed to come on and talk about what it's really like to work in UX. So we'll be taking your questions live. You can ask those questions in the LinkedIn chat, the YouTube chat, or now accepting tweets. So tweet at Delta_CX if you would like, and we can pick those up as well. A reminder to everybody, please empathize with the like button and please subscribe here on the YouTube channel. And all of your questions are answered here, deltacx.com/links. How do I join the giveaway? Where's your extra courses? Where's your HR training? How do I ask a question in Tuesday's thing? How do I get you to react to stuff? It's all here. I made a giant page. I did a thing. So check that out. And a quick thanks to the people who've been supporting the channel by being paid YouTube subscribers. Totally optional, but very appreciated. Anita, Chang, Darren, somebody who seems to be called I Can, Irena, Jordan, Michelle, Nikki, Ralitza, Ray, today's guest, Solomon, and Mix Betty. So thanks to the people who are supporting the channel. So let me bring everybody in and let's see. Why do people look frozen? Is everybody still here? Sophie is here. Solomon, Julia, did we lose you? Sophie, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
That's great. Well, Solomon and Julia seem to be frozen. I'm not too sure what happened there. And I will have to quickly go to LinkedIn and tell them to please refresh their screens and come on back. So, Sophie, while we try to get them back, would you please introduce yourself?
Certainly. Thank you so much for having me, Debbie.
Thanks
It's
for
always
coming.
great to be there. So I'm Sophie Frymouth on Twitter. You can find me at Wicked Geeky. That's with an IE. And I'm also on LinkedIn, and my name is very complicated. But if you look for Sophie, FREI, and then there's more ERMUTH, you will get to me at some point. Wicked Geeky with an IE at the end is a great way of finding me. Quite notorious.
Super. And Solomon, looks like you're back. We don't have Julia, who's going to have to leave early today anyway, but hopefully she can get back into the system. Sophie, tell everybody quickly your background in UX since, welcome, Julia. You're back. We're still introducing Sophie, and then we'll introduce you and Solomon. Sophie, give us a little bit of a background. Give us the 1-minute version of your UX career so people watching can know how long you've been doing this.
The 1 minute is I had a previous career in sales and marketing until the late 90s. I was doing websites and already doing UX back in 98, 99. I didn't know what it was, but I was wireframing and I was thinking of pages that would work for the users. And I have been working as a full-time UX designer since 2006. I have worked in agencies in the UK, and then I went independent and worked a lot client side. I do the full scope of UX from user research to designing interfaces, with a lot of product strategy in it. And I now expand to business strategy, product management, agile coaching, and guests on awesome podcasts.
Oh, you cover me in butter. Thank you. All right, so let's meet Solomon and then Julia. Solomon, if you don't mind, spell your name so people can stalk you online, and let's hear a little bit of your UX background.
Hey everyone, this is Solomon. My name is spelled Salomon. The last name is Onyegbulem. I've been doing this whole design thing for just almost 4 years now. I started in graphic and web design, believe you or not. And I think somehow, somewhere, while I was freelancing, I started coming up with this doing what I call the objective design, which is essentially what UX is all about, until I found out about it and was introduced to my first UX manager. And it's been like this ever since. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Charlene says, finally a face behind those amazing comments. Um, He's the parrot. He's the parrot emoji. Julia, we met you on episode, I think it was 2 or 3 or 4 of the Fake Observational Research Cooking Show, but please tell us more about you and your UX background.
Yes, so I'm Julia, spelled Julia, last name Dinoto. So I'm the most junior of the group. I professionally have been working in UX consulting for the past year, but before that I had a few internships, and before that I was finishing up a master's program to study UX after doing a career change.
Can we ask what you changed from?
Oh, I didn't know what I was doing. It was a communication grad that ended up in a human resources job. That's a long story for another day.
Okay, the rainbow of fruity flavors. Okay, great. So I want to start with a happy. I know everybody in the chat loves to hear crazy stories, but let's start with a happy story. Can each of you give me a short but happy story about working in UX? A time when something went well, a time when UX saved the day, a time when something went right. Let's see, who might be ready for that? Solomon, do you have a story?
I'll point to collaboration, which is something that I find myself doing a lot. I'm working with very intelligent and confident engineers, and they sometimes don't understand what UX is about, what designers do, right? I'm sure you've all heard, "Hey, you guys make the pretty screens, right? You guys are the nerds. You make the stuff look nice." And through exposure, so what I started doing, anytime I came across this issue, was just expose the process with the engineers, and eventually they started to think of my team, think of us as partners in helping solve problems. So that's kind of my success story.
That is
I
a
want to name the
beautiful
company.
thing. Hold on, we've got to set off the hearts for that one. That is rare. That's a beautiful thing. Happy stories. Julia, do you have one?
Yeah, I can think of, like you said, like UX kind of saved the day. I was working with this one company, and they had this very big assumption that two different user groups would love to share everything between each other. All this transparency. And we were doing a usability test for something else at the time, and I was like, I want to confirm that while we're doing these tests. Like, let's see if we can Trojan horse some interview questions and figure out if this is really true, because we had some doubts. And we did find out it wasn't true. One of the parties was very hard, absolutely not, this will ruin everything. So we were able to give the guidance to maybe not move forward with that assumption.
Excellent. Save the day indeed. Sophie, you save the day every day, but pick a story, please.
So one story that really got me confident in my skills was 10 years ago. I was working on an e-com shop at a highly reputed creative agency, and I was tasked with creating the product page. And as you know, product page needs to work at displaying all kinds of data that is pushed in from the back end. And the challenge here was the product page needed to throw back. They needed to work as a template for either ebooks, films, video clips, and songs. And I was a midweight at that time, going on to being a senior. And I was thrown that at me, and I played with that data for a while. And eventually I cracked it, in that the page would have to have fields that are empty if there's no data in them, and then if everything goes fine, the things display at the right time. And I met with the lead developer and solutions architect, who came to me and said, "Okay, let's crack this." And I show him my wireframe with these fields already, and I said, all that has to happen is that the data is correctly tagged, and then it should display in the right place if you've coded it well. And then he looked at me and he said, "Oh, you've cracked it. I thought we were going to spend weeks on that." And I was like, okay. And that day I knew I was a real UXer.
Yay, you did it. That's beautiful. Let me ask for our next question. I want to ask each person, we'll go in a different order. Tell us about a typical day in the life, a typical day or a typical week in the work that you do. If you don't want to talk about a current job because it might be confidential, maybe talk about a past job, but just, think about the newbies out there who wonder what's working in UX really like. And wow, I see these YouTube videos where it's all catered lunches and people unicycling around a San Francisco office. So what would you say a day or a week is really like? Can I start with Julia, since I know know we're going to lose you in 20 minutes.
Yeah, and I was thinking about this beforehand. A lot of my answers are going to be it depends, just because of the nature of consulting and the fact that every project is a little bit different. Um, yeah, okay, that's perfect. But yeah, currently I can talk about my current day in the life. I mean, what I'm doing right now. I work for a consultancy and I also work for a client. So usually I'll log on to my consulting laptop and I'll just check, do I have any emails? Do I have any things I need to do internally? Any extra work I'm doing for the company? But then I pretty much spend the whole day working on my client side. So I'll usually we have a couple daily meetings for some things that I'm helping them out with right now. I'm working on a big research plan. So really, I've just been working and collaborating with their designers and their leaders to fill some gaps in my knowledge and to create this research plan. So it's been a lot of heads down time recently, which is nice, but not every day is like that. Some days are 6 hours of meetings with people in the company. So
Death by meeting. It is real. Was there anything you were going to add to that?
no.
Okay, and scene. Sophie, day or week in the life of the Sophie.
Day a week in the life of the Sophie. So when the Sophie is in a UX role, right now I'm more in a product management role. A typical week would be, and I was working on a tool, on a ticketing tool for a transport company, and the week would be 1 day of research on the ground with users. So for that day, I would have had to have an updated prototype. So I would tweak the prototype depending on what I'd heard previously, go spend the day testing with them, then spend a day just re-listening, taking my notes, figuring out what to do next. Then I would share a lot of these insights with the developers. I would share with the business analyst who would write the stories for me. I was very spoiled. And I would liaise a lot with the product owner so that we would balance the vision that the product had to achieve with the learnings I had on the ground. And there was this constant iteration. I was testing every week back then all over the UK and France. It was a good job. It was real UX.
Real UX. We'll have to ask you later what non-real UX looks like. Solomon, do you have a day in the life or week in the life?
Well, it starts off with breakfast in bed. I get my butler Patootie to bring me my. No, I'm
You
kidding.
just
Okay.
told me you don't eat until dinner. The lies, the lies.
Yes, and then we have catered lunches, and everyone gets into meetings, an all hands meeting every day, all
In your
day.
house.
Yes, right in this tiny little room, we all fit, all 800 of us, we all fit in here. No, so it depends. My answer is basically Julia's answer. It depends, right? Most of the time, I'm spending working heads down, right? There's the occasional following up on previous work that's still in implementation. And that means that I'm answering questions to engineering, or I'm reaching out to engineering and letting them know that something isn't right. Um, yeah, that's most of my time. The rest of it is spent doing the whole strategic planning work that goes into conducting any research, right? So if I'm planning on doing usability testing, then I'll reach out to one of our whoever my point of contact is. Most of the time, it's a product manager who might reach out to whoever has the contact to whoever it is we're trying to talk to. So sometimes I mean direct customers. Sometimes I mean I've worked on a lot of internal products the last 2 years. So sometimes I mean talking to our own employees. So yeah, that's the typical day. There's no free lunch here.
Yes, exactly. That there used to be, but now we're all home eating our own lunch. So we've got a comment in the chat room from a new friend of the show, Eunice, and I wanted to ask you maybe for some of your stories. He said that a friend told him about her time as a UX worker in Paris and said she spent more time defending her career than practicing it. So let's turn that into a question for each of you. How much time would you say you are explaining UX or defending UX or trying to prove the value of UX or evangelizing UX versus how much time you just get to do your job in peace? Sophie, not when you're a product manager, back in your UX world.
Back in UX, I still do UX on the side. I've had to do the product management because if that wasn't done, I couldn't do the UX. I am a very very privileged person that I take jobs. Either I take jobs that I know are going to be evangelizing roles, where the job is to explain it way more than doing it, and doing it just enough to demonstrate that when you do what you say you do, things are better. And then the other jobs are, I very much lead by example. So I try to not explain, but either take the person along and show them. So I don't explain to them how the engine works. I open the hood and I put a wrench in their hands and I say, look at this, look at that, look at this user testing, and this is everything we have to fix. Pure evangelizing, standing on a soapbox in the corner, doesn't work for UX. You have to demonstrate you bring value. You have to demonstrate that you're useful. And it's sometimes a challenge to do the job on the side and find the ugly low-hanging fruits and quick wins, just so you buy a little bit of kudos and it gives you a little bit of runway and you can do a little bit more. But I try not to, if I start having to defend my job, I go back to the person who got me in there and I make them do it.
Got it. I'm doing thank you face because Charlene donated a super sticker. So thank you to Charlene for for the donation. We appreciate that. It'll buy chocolate chips and help us in the algorithm, and I appreciate both. So thank you for that. And the extra emojis that ended up on my face. I have no control over these, y'all. I want to ask Solomon, how much of your time do you feel like you're spending explaining, defending, evangelizing UX versus just doing your work?
Now, not so much. Initially, in the beginning, when I started doing this work, I did that a lot, right? Because I had no strategy, I had no plan. And I found out that just throwing a lot of jargon at people, whoever it is, because I remember most of the time people are looking from their own perspective. If they're an engineer, right, they're thinking about code, they're not thinking about users, right? And so throwing words like, we need to do a heuristic evaluation, or we need to conduct usability testing, even the word research, right, gets people itching. Like, research, what? So initially that was roughly 75% of my time was talking to people, but then I found out that does not work at all. So what I've started to do is just expose it, right? Expose the process, and that works a lot better for me. So I don't evangelize UX. I just expose our folks to users, and they watch the users trash the product, or have issues, or explain their pain points, and that usually gets the point across.
Super. Julia, same question to you.
Yeah, I feel like similar to what Solomon said, I'm not doing it really as much anymore. But I feel like I'm in a really lucky position right now because people are already coming to my company asking for UX. So I don't run into really needing to fight for it because they are already paying for it and they've already decided they want it, which is really great. But I have found that sometimes they don't fully understand what it is and what it can do. But that's when I do like a similar thing. I do the work, show the results, show them people getting frustrated with the product, show them what the research and what the impact of that was on the design. But yeah, I think I'm pretty lucky right now, especially if it's a research only role. I feel like when they're hiring a researcher, they know what they're going to get out of it, or at least so far in the year I've been here.
You're doing a great job. I still remember when you got the job. That was so exciting. So I still can't believe it's been a whole year since. I know a lot of our low ego action heroes are interviewing right now. Maybe just to help everybody feel a little bit better, can you think about a time when a job interview went kind of bad? And, maybe you didn't get the job, maybe you didn't want the job, but can you think about like a disaster interview, just to hopefully inspire everybody that even when you have a disaster interview, there's still a job in your future. And then we've got a chat room question. Anybody have a interview nightmare story they want to share?
I have a quick one. I'm called by a recruiter for a role. I book my afternoon off. I get out of my job. I'm across town, meet the person. They sit me down and they say, so what qualification do you have in HCI? And I'm like, did you read my CV? I don't have any. And they go, well, we only hire people with HCI degrees. And I said, well, then we're done, aren't we?
Right.
And we kind of looked at one another stupidly. They were British and I was way too in their face for their taste. But I was like, you didn't do your homework. and you're pissing me off because that's time off I booked. So I'm going to make you squirm in your chair. Flip things around. Don't ever let recruiters own you. You're equal in the discussion, everyone, whatever your age. They need a worker and you need a boss, 50-50. No BS.
You can all see why I love Sophie. We are secretly cousins, I'm sure. We'll have to check the family trees. Julia, do you have an interview nightmare story?
I can just, what comes to my mind right before I accepted my previous internship before this job, I was interviewing for another one. And it was a typical, like, I got the design challenge and they wanted me to do free work. So, like, red flag number one. Red flag number two is the person interviewing me. I think they were a manager of the team with less experience than I had as a person interviewing for an internship. Yeah, I did some LinkedIn stalking and I was like, wait a minute. And yeah, it was a really awkward, uncomfortable interview. I went in there and they asked about my skills and I told them, I'm a generalist. I like both things, whatever. And like, well, we're looking for more specialized people, but they continued to act interested. And I was like, but I am I will do both. I do not specialize. And it just like wasn't clicking in. Thank God I got the offer for my other internship in the middle of that. And I had to be like, okay, sorry, I'm not doing your design challenge ever.
Yes.
Yeah, I still think about that.
Well, sorry to bring back the painful memories. Let's see. And Aitan is here, as you can tell from the pandas, and she's got a comment I'll throw on the screen. Salomon, nightmare interview story?
I don't think I've ever had a nightmare interview story. I did have a story that's similar to Sophie's, where a recruiter had reached out to me about a role that she thought I was a great fit for. Fast forward, I get on the call with the hiring manager, and I discovered that there are evidence of a lack of communication between the recruiter and the hiring manager. So the description that the hiring manager gave me of the job was entirely different from what the recruiter had told me. So I'm sitting here alone. Okay, right. Uh-huh. I am not the person for this type of job. So, and another thing that really made me or caught my attention was the very first question that the hiring manager asked me was, what are the four pillars of a great checkout experience? It wasn't a hello, how are you? What's your name? What are your, qualifications? How long have you been doing this? It's hi, what are the four pillars of a great checkout experience? And I just checked out from that question. It just and after talking to him for a few more seconds, I realized, yeah, there's a lack of there's a disconnect between what the recruiter was telling me and what the hiring manager was telling me the job was. So I realized, yeah, this is not going anywhere.
I was going to tell a story just like that, though it's like yours and Sophie's stories together, because I ended up like putting on my blazer and driving out to Oracle, only to find out the recruiter had sold me as a visual designer, and I'm showing them all of my medium fidelity Axure work, and they're just looking at me really weird, and I'm going on and on about my interaction design choices and information architecture, and finally they're like, "Where's your visual design portfolio?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, what did the recruiter tell you?" And they're like, "The recruiter said you're a visual designer." And I said, "The recruiter told me this was a pure UX job with no visual design. I am so sorry. I am packing up and leaving. I'm going now. Thank you so much for your time. I'm so sorry." And they were like, "Okay, thanks." And I left and I sent the recruiter an angry email like, "What did you do?" And she's like, "You knew what you were walking into. You knew what this job was." And I was like, "I never would have gone, especially to Oracle, where you want to make a good impression on people. I never would have gone. Like, what?" So, so there's that. But I'll tell another story after Julia goes, because we only have Julia a couple more minutes. So let's get one more question, and she's going to answer this one first. This is from Charlene. And she says she'd like to know a little bit more about how you show or expose your UX process. Most of the times, dev, BAs, PMs are just busy with their work. So I guess back to what we were talking about not evangelizing and just showing the value. Julia, how do you show or expose that process and its value?
I would love to hear the answers because they're, Shalene is right. Developers are often very busy. But when it comes to non-developers, I mean, and I know you probably will hate this, but I do like to bring them into the work and not to necessarily do it. But like, for example, right now I said I'm working on a research plan, right? And there's a design team and a product team involved with this. So I'm just exposing it in the middle of my work. Hey, here's where I'm at. Here's a process that I'm following. And then bringing them in and having them help out where their expertise can help me out. I feel like when they feel like they're a part of it, they at least appreciate it more. And when they see it kind of in the middle of it being done, um, depending on who it is, higher ups probably don't want to see the messy stuff. But when they see it in the middle of it being done, they understand that I'm following a process, I'm working towards something, and that the final result of the pretty screen or the insights presentation, there was actually something to get there.
Oh, thank you. Great. So, how about Solomon? How do you show your UX process, especially to busy teammates?
The first thing I do when I join any team is to get to know the people, which I would encourage everyone to do. Like if you're just getting in, I would encourage you to get to know the people you're going to be working with, whatever team you're going to be working with. Just get a sense or a feel for what they think UX does, what they think UX is, and how they feel about that. Right? You start by exposing yourself, not necessarily the process. Start by exposing yourself and making it known that you are a partner. So that's what I do. I get to know the people and making it known that I'm available, I'm here, and I'm a partner, and I'm here to help them, right? We are working together to solve problems. And forget about the word UX. Forget about, all these fancy terminologies. Just establish a relationship, right? Establish a connection, a partnership, right? And from there, just depending on schedules, right? So for me, usually, since I know or I establish a connection ahead of time, I kind of know like what they're doing, what their off days are, or the days that they'd be more inclined to join a session, like an interview session or usability session, and then go from there. And I'll just invite them. And for the most part, the people that I've worked with have been interested. They've been excited because they've never done it before, right? They may have never been invited to watch the magic happen. So that's my strategy.
And I just want to mention quickly before I ask Sophie for a question, Julia's going to have to run. She has a meeting in a couple of minutes, and I just want to thank Julia so much for giving us some of her time and her answers today. And I'm sorry we're losing you, but thank you again for joining us for the time you did, Ms. Julia.
Thank you. I'm going to sign off now. Bye.
Okay, be safe. See you soon. Bye.
Thank you.
And I'm going to switch to the usual Debbie, Darren, and Dr. Nick screen, except it says Sophie and Solomon this time. So Sophie, over to you. How do you, when you're doing more of the UX work, how do you expose or share your work and process?
So after years of experimenting, I know when I expose, I literally expose. So I take every opportunity I have to show early rough work. I do not shy. If you give me 2 minutes in a meeting, oh, Sophie, what have you been working on? I will slap you whatever I'm working on in whatever state it's on. I do not shy from showing, doodles on a whiteboard or very early wireframes or whipping out Axure or Sketch or whatever I'm using and just showing them the work as it is. I don't ask for permission. Like whatever 2 minutes you give me, I don't tell you about it. I show you. And in terms of inviting people to research, because you use a research session about an hour, you need to set them up. In my current team, what I ended up doing was inviting everyone to what I've called the cinema and making it a bit of a joke. And I say, bring your popcorn. It's 30 minutes and I will play you clips of this week's user sessions. And I edit a little bit and I give them 30 minutes of, depending on the day, that's anything between 3 and 5, 6 little clips. And I just give them a little bit of context, but I select clips that don't show good outcomes. I show them users struggling for good reasons. So that buys me leverage to do the work. And I always balance it by saying, we didn't do it badly. We thought it was right. And it's turned out to be not quite right enough. So we need a little bit more work. And really, I shove the work everywhere I can. So I figure out expose, like like the pervert opening their raincoat and showing the stuff. That's my version of exposing UX. Just people
Now
don't have
that's
a choice.
exposing.
They will see early wireframes and the inner workings of the calculation in an X-ray prototype.
Totally
That
agreed.
buys a lot
Yeah.
of respect.
Thanks for that. We've got a bunch of questions in the chat room. We've got two in the queue. So let me pull up our next question, which is from Ahmad, which says, how do UXers manage and update their portfolio while on a job or a project? So I guess, let's adjust that question slightly. How and when do you update your portfolio? Do you do it while you're on a job or a project? Sophie, you look exploding with answers.
So I am an awful person because I have been, I'm people like grandma UX is old enough and notorious enough that I actually don't need to show a portfolio. The portfolio that I have is this horrendous PowerPoint that I basically update once every 5 years when I really feel I have to. I try my best to document what I'm doing and try to keep snippets of it. A lot of the work that I've done, unfortunately, was NDA'd or super highly confidential. But really, the only advice I have is take 5 minutes every week, because until you're in the position of utter privilege that people call me and they say, I don't need to see your portfolio, just come and do your thing, which is where I am after, you know, 15 years of very hard work. The portfolio will open new doors. I'm pretty sure that one day I will be asked for one and it will close me a door, but until then, I'm kind of surfing that wave.
Yeah, I feel you. That was my world in San Francisco before I moved away. It was like, we heard about you. When are you available? And so
Yeah.
my portfolio looks truly strange. Solomon, do you update your portfolio? How often? Give us your secrets.
I don't. I do not update my portfolio at all. I don't have a portfolio. Okay. Uh,
You
usually, I
don't do it
mean,
when you're
it's
fine.
yeah, it's not a thought until I'm looking for work. Like I know that's not that I wouldn't recommend anybody do that. You should be
It's
updating your
common.
portfolio like what Sophie says. you know, once every week, just refresh and take a look at it and see if get some feedback on it. I would recommend you do that because you never know when you're going to be in a need of a switch, right? You never know when that might happen. So, but for me, I don't remember the last time I updated my portfolio.
I feel you. I had to update it a few weeks ago and I was like, damn. So I do recommend that people try to take at least a half day a month or so, put aside a few hours on a weekend and take a fresh look at what you've been working on the last month, or do it every other month. But you never know when you're going to be looking for a new job because something bad happens at your company or something else happens in your world. And people, I find, are so exhausted and stressed out at the idea of updating their portfolio. Don't wait until you're looking. Try to put aside some time monthly or every other month to keep it updated. But we do have an appropriate follow-up question from Eunice, who's asking, what about if your work has company IP? How, can you show this in
Yeah.
your portfolio? What do you do with this? Solomon, you're not updating your portfolio very much, but let's start with you. No, you're not taking the question.
No.
Pass.
Mm-mm. I mean, I'm
Okay.
not passing. I'm not passing. I'm not passing. You just you don't put that work in your portfolio. For me, I got to the point where I could talk about the problems that I was solving, and I'd rather spend my time doing that than like showing what is it, high fidelity mocks or screens. So that's usually what I do when I get to the point where I have to like demonstrate my expertise in UX. So but as for that doesn't really answer your question. Should you put um, it's stuff that's on NDA in your portfolio? No. My short answer is no. The long answer is it depends. You could go about trying to get approval uh, to maybe redact certain things. Like I remember there was a company that I had interned with a long time ago that I had to like notify, right, to tell them what kind of work I was going to put in my portfolio and what exactly was going to be in there. So you might be able to get away with doing something like that, where you remove a portion of the information that is not critical to the whole story. So short answer is no. Long answer is it depends.
Sophie,
Yeah, Solomon
confidential
is spot
stuff?
on. There, remember in the portfolio, there are two things. First of all, there is the story you're telling about what happened, and not just what happened, but the way you handled what happened. And that part you can always tell because the process you applied in the course of an endeavor is the job and it's not under the NDA. So saying that we didn't know how to approach this, so we started by interviewing 20 people who did the job that we wanted to help is not breaking an NDA. However, what is under NDA is the final screens. And then there's a real problem because redacting part of the screen often removes the meaning. So I find that there are two ways of going about it. Either you identify screens that are a little bit neutral and you hide the logo and you show lorem ipsum content, and everybody's happy because you've got a high fidelity comp, or you go take another example and say, this is the level of fidelity that my work had. I cannot show you the real one. But fundamentally, they're not hiring you to do exactly the same screen you did at Acme Corp. They're hiring you because when faced with a problem, you decided to do either no user research. You decided to go no prototypes, trade in the code with the developer, pair developing. You decided to sit down with a product owner and a business analyst and write, dozens of requirements. Like that's what your portfolio is about. It should show your personality and your process. And we have a range of portfolios that come from the visual world: photography, architecture, visual design. These are not UX design portfolios. Ours tell stories. They don't necessarily show the details of the story.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, I have a portfolio full of secrets because so much of it was confidential. So, what I've started doing is just the storytelling part because I really can't show the artifacts. So, if you go to, I have it at like deltacx.com/work, I think is where I put it. And so, some people know that the big project Delta CX did last year, where I talked about an observational research with 71 people, was for Etsy. And I can tell you we did work for Etsy, and I can tell you it was observational research, and I can tell you a couple of things about it, but I can't tell you what part of the Etsy site it was about. I can't tell you any of the things that we found or learned or heard. I can't show you any of our notes or affinity diagrams or whatever. If I show you something, it's going to be so zoomed out, you're never going to see anything it says. And I just have to tell you the story of the project because I can't show you or even talk about some of those specifics because, and I won't talk about those specifics because I want to get a job in this town again.
Yeah, and Debbie, it's interesting because you and I are both very senior. So at our level, we're not really selling our own design skills. Very often we come with teams or we come in a very strategic advisory capacity. And I've now started creating case studies of the work that I've done, which is a different narrative. And basically, rather than sending a portfolio now, I direct potential clients to the case studies. They are at on the company website at Baguette UX, Baguette like the French bread, BAGUETTEUX.com. And if you look into the word, there are case studies, and these case studies are signed off by the clients. So I can slap the logos on them and they tell the story. But the interesting thing of the case study is that it allows me to ask for the people I've worked with to be interviewed and to give their side of the story. And I find that to be so much more powerful to have somebody who says, well, working with Sophie was interesting because finally we heard the users, which is very different to me saying I went and interviewed users every week, every month, every quarter.
Right.
So this is me advocating for case studies instead of portfolio elements.
Yeah, I guess it depends on your level and seniority and
Yeah,
who your audience is. But
after a while, it makes more sense.
yeah, no, so knowing we've about 20 minutes left, let me get some more questions out. We've got Aitan, we've got Roman from LinkedIn asking a question, and then Ahmad had a follow-up question. So thanks to everybody for these great questions. Next is super friend of the show, Aitan. who asks, I want to ask my favorite question. How do you explain UX to people who know nothing about UX? So surely somewhere in your work worlds, you've run into someone who's been like, UX, what's that? Do you have a stock answer ready to go, Solomon?
Mm. Yeah, I just point them to a really badly designed website and ask them to perform a task. And should they fail, I'll explain, what it is that I would do to make their lives easier. So in a monologue, it would be something like, think about the products or services that you use every day and the things that make it hard for you to do what you want to do, right? The challenges with using that product or service or tool. Think about that. Now think about me. I make all those problems go away.
Nice. Very
Magic
smooth.
man. Very smooth. Okay. Sophie, your smoothness, what are you doing?
So I also started by explaining to them, can you think of the last time you tried to do something on your phone or on a website and the button wasn't where you expected it. And then what happened wasn't you expected and you couldn't finish and you couldn't find the thing that you're sure they were there. Well, you had a site that worked, but that was hard to use. And what I do is go beyond making things work, which is it's code, it's hard work, but I take it beyond to make it work for people like you. And that means going beyond the functional into the usable. So it's easy to use. And then it goes also to the accessible so that everyone can use it, whether it's on a phone or or a big screen, a keyboard, or your finger. Maybe you're using a screen reader. Maybe you have, some low vision. It has to work, but not just that, it has to work well. And this is where I come in. I take it to that extra level.
Also smooth. All right, I'm going to shift to Roman's question from LinkedIn. It's a little bit of a strange question, but I hope we can turn it into something. It says, and I can't put it on the screen because it's LinkedIn. It says, I've worked in an agency as a visual designer. I've been trying to apply for a UX position. How can I answer for my design decisions when we rarely had much data when I worked on projects because of budget constraints and etc.? So this is hard because if you've been doing visual design and you haven't been doing UX work, I don't know what's in your portfolio that would show UX work. And I don't know if you can answer for design decisions. If you didn't have data, ultimately you might end up saying, I liked this better. I guess my question would be, were any users involved ever in any way in research or testing so that you knew you were making the right thing for them? That would be my question. Ralitza, I see your question. We'll put it at the end of the list. Sophie or Solomon, anything to add to that? Design decisions when there was no data behind them?
I've got a question, which is, he does the visual design, but has anyone done the pillars of UX behind, which is not just user research, it's the information architecture and the interaction design, and possibly a way, if there's always data, and if anything, go out and do guerrilla user research on your own, on your time off. I have done that when I was working agency. I was a UX designer, but there was never budget for research. I would go out on the street and I would ask people. I would call friends and I would drag the visual designers and the junior UX designer with me. And I've gone to train station and I was dragging junior behind me, and we're like, we're going to spot the people who obviously have time and we're going to show them our designs and we're going to come back. And in an hour, you get some insights. You can either use that in your day-to-day work, or you can put that in your portfolio and say, well, I did a sanity check. Also check if you're doing the right things, which is, do you understand the architecture you're putting? Are you all about typography, colors, what spacing, or are you adding, thinking that every screen action needs a reaction, every user action needs a reaction? Are you using those fundamentals of, the content is architected in a way that the most important is in a place that is most expected? So show that you understand that UX is not pretty and wireframes and prototypes. It's about really understanding the skeleton that goes behind the visual and before the code comes in to make it a reality.
Yeah, Roman's writing that he ran a survey, and obviously
That's
in
a
you,
start.
yeah, it's a thing. Though in UX, that's typically not our go-to method, but it can be a thing. Solomon, anything to add to that? Design decisions when you haven't had much data.
No, no. Sophie articulated perfectly, right? You have to show what problem were you solving. If you can explain that and how your solution meets or addresses the problem. I mean, if it was an accessibility related thing, then maybe you could talk about that. Like, hey, we found out that a vast portion of the people that use this part of the site were colorblind and they were not able to locate this blah blah blah. And so we made these visual changes. It looks visual, but it's actually accessible, right? It's about accessibility. So you may be able to talk about that, but otherwise, we just, no,
Tough.
there's nothing. Yeah, it's tough.
It's tough. Let me move on. We have a great question from Ralitza. Ahmad, no offense, your question's kind of not relevant today, and we have such limited time with these people. I'm going to skip it. I'm sorry. Maybe come ask it on a Tuesday office hours. The question was, what's the difference between a mid and senior weight portfolio? So I'm going to blow by that one because I really want to talk more about your experiences in UX. And Ralitza has a super question that we're going to ask for both of you. And Roman is saying if it's a new business or a startup, they don't have much data. Roman, that's their choice. They can always spend a little time and money to get data. Let's not make excuses. Okay, Ralitza's fantastic question is, in your experience, what's the worst part of working in UX? What are your top 3 things you dislike about your job? Again, it could be a past job and maybe not the current one. And what do you love? So this is going to be probably a long answer from each of you. I'll start with Solomon. What 3 things you've hated about UX jobs, things you love?
Uh, I think for me right now is the ambiguity, right? UX means something different depending on who it is you're talking to, and that's a challenge on its own. Um, and then actually doing the work, actually getting the support that you need to do the work, right? If you're planning on doing research, there's a lot to that, right? And people may not be inclined to support that. They would prefer for you to create the what is it that Debbie you say create the pretty mock-ups with pretty wireframes. Um, and I come across that often. Make the thing. We already know what these people want. We've thought about it. We've gotten together and we've discussed it, and we like the idea. So we're going to go ahead and ship it. And we just need you to make the pretty wireframes, mock-ups, and whatnot. That's one of the challenges. One of the things I don't love. I think part of it is the fact that it has the word design attached to it, like UX design. It's not really just user experience, but it's user experience design. And everyone feels, because of how visible or the visible nature of design, everyone feels that they have a say, right? They have an opinion on design, and sometimes it's a balancing act of trying to explain and get buy-in on the ideas that we've actually tested that we know are going to work versus the ones that people are passionate about because they see design and they want to design and they want to make something pretty. Those would be my 3 things. um, but as far as what I love I like the fact that we're able to make people's lives better, you know? As a UX, but whatever your title is, titles are a mess right now. Product designers, we got CX designers, we got interaction design, blah, 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 all of that. But at the end of the day, you're solving a problem for someone, and that's my favorite thing to do. When I can take an experience that's really bad, that's causes a lot of challenges, right? Has a lot of pain points associated to it. And I can make those things go away and make it easier for someone that isn't technologically inclined to make a payment, right? To purchase something, to send a message to their daughter or son, sister, but whatever, right? That's my favorite part.
Helping the peeps. I feel you there. It's about the love. Sophie, how about you? Some things you've hated, your worst things about UX jobs, and then something you love.
So the things that I hate, the first one is the constant pull and tear that we feel because we're sitting between the space of the users, we're sitting between the space of the business, and we're sitting we're sitting in between the space that is touching on the one hand users, on the other the business, and finally the technology and the technical capability. And in some cases, the gap between the three is huge, and the UX designer has to stretch like seriously just stretch themselves to bridge the gap between the users and the business, and stretch to bridge the gap between the business and the capabilities that the technical team has. And it can be exhausting. And that's when the vision is completely disconnected from the reality of what users need, what the market needs. And also when you have a not very good tech team, and doing anything is a massive effort, or they're complicated, or they're that can be painful because I just want to do great things. And I just, like Solomon, like I want to help people. I want to put out products that improve the web and that inspires other companies to do better. And being slowed down by, you know, a team that can deliver, or a business that's overly ambitious, just frustrates me a lot. The other thing that frustrates me is the fact that sometimes what's in my head is actually quite hard to express through software. And whether it's design software or prototyping software, or even just pen and paper. And usually it's a sign that the idea is not mature enough, because ultimately it will be a series of steps on a screen. And if I cannot output it, then it's not mature. But this moment of frustration of realizing my vision has more holes than substance is the hard part of the job. I think I've cracked it, but in reality, I haven't. And the third part that frustrates me is sometimes being seen as a wireframe machine that churns out reliably a wireframe every 4 hours. And not every problem is the same. And my usual metaphor is the speed at which tech can deliver it and the speed at which I can UX it have nothing in common. And the simplest example is single sign-on, because single sign-on from a UX point of view, it's the simplest wireframe ever. Username, password, login, reset password, register. And from tech, it's 2 years of nightmare. Next question. That shuts down everyone usually. But that's the best example. Like with the time the time it takes to uncover what the users need or how to make this feature work. There are features that have spun around, you know, 10 or 12 times. Like I think of the ticketing software, like some features, there were dozens of variations until we got it right. And that's sometimes like, you've got to keep the belief that you're on track. It's a very humbling job, very often. UXers, there's lots of people who undertake UX thinking they're God. They're going to direct their vision on the product. They're going to direct their vision onto the tech team. They will impose their product on the world. And it is you in this, you're not a servant leader. You're a servant of everyone. It's an executing role, not a strategic role. Your capacity to influence anything is extremely limited, non-existent in the beginning, and it will take a long time and opportunities and luck and skills and talent to get into a position where you can really influence and change things.
Thank you. Thank you. So we've got one more question. We'll go with Ahmad's last question, but I'm going to ask for the lightning version answer so that we have time for you to each give your closing statements, and we'll get out of here on time. So Ahmad asked a question I think is really interesting, which is, if you could redesign the domain of UX, what changes would you make? And then he added that would impact working UXers. But I think we didn't need that part. So this is going to have to be the lightning version. Sorry about that, lightning. What would you change about our profession? The 1-minute version, Sophie.
I would say you cannot call yourself a UX designer if you do not conduct research with users. Ever. End of story. No research, no design.
Thank you. I like it. Okay. Solomon, what would you change about our profession?
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
She took my answer. That's mine.
Really?
I believe I don't have much to comment on this. I believe what's his name? The grandfather of UX.
Don
Uh,
Norman?
Don
Don Norman
Norman.
was working on this whole plan to redefine design education, and I think there's a potential. There's a host of information and things that you would need to learn. Um, or let me rephrase this. There's a host of things that I would add into almost every school's curriculum that I believe are integral or key to becoming a well-rounded designer, a well-rounded UX person, whatever you happen to call yourself. That's where I would start. So check out, what Don and Debbie, I believe you're on that board too, for design, the future of design education.
Yes, and everybody knows I'm on fire about UX education. We did a show on it yesterday. So very quickly, catch episode 136, fixing the two key problems with CX and UX education. And I'm going to be hopefully starting to fix them single-handedly on Monday's show. Tune in Monday, where I'm going to start doing one of my Think Out Loud episodes, where someone's going to give me real or fake work, and I'm going to crack open Axure and design it and show you how I approach designing things. So there's that. So what would
That'll be
I?
your new portfolio, Debbie.
No, definitely not stuff for my portfolio, but hopefully something that helps people understand how I approach information architecture and interaction design and prototyping, and hopefully helps them understand. Um, and there's a bit of a kerfuffle in the chat room. We just want to clarify something Sophie just said. Sophie, it sounds like the last thing you said, some people in the chat room might be taking as designers should do research. And we have some research specialists in the chat room who, and now I think you meant you either have to do good research or you have to get good research from a researcher. But I think the way you said it, and I can't roll it back just now, made it sound like designers should do the research. Can you help me out here? The specialist researchers are
Yeah.
saying you're taking my job.
No, we're not taking your job, but you cannot design if you don't do firsthand research. And this is where you can do research by accompanying a researcher, by taking the notes, by conducting questions. No, seriously, there is a space for pure user researchers. And I do some jobs, and I run a user research consultancy that do pure user research. But seriously, you cannot design if you don't have this opportunity to not just see the user, but ask them and taking them through tasks, but also this opportunity to ask them questions about their behavior yourself, not through a third party. So some roles, some jobs, depending on the product and the company and the context and your audience, if you have the luxury of having a full-time user researcher, they have so much deep work to do, and in particular, all the operational stuff. But at one point, the designers need to be in direct contact with the users they're designing for. And no designer can hide themselves behind a researcher, and that's second degree insights. So researchers working with designers, open the door, let them in, share the work, take the tough users, split the sessions, but you cannot exclude anyone. And even when I was a designer, take on the developer in. Like you've got to expose, designers need to be exposed firsthand to users. That's my position. You're absolutely free to disagree.
And that's okay. Sometimes we disagree here. We had someone come on the show last year and go like, design thinking is great. And I said nothing, and everybody knows I hate design thinking. And, I just said nothing. So sometimes people come on the show and say things we don't totally disagree with, and that's fine. It's everybody's perspectives and their experiences, and it works for them. So researchers in the chat room, don't worry, we're not coming for your jobs. There's enough for everybody.
No, and we need you. We need
Yes,
your researchers
we
because it's
do.
a very difficult job to do well, and
Yes.
very few people do it well.
Agreed, agreed. And your average designer unfortunately doesn't do it well. So I hope everybody will partner up. So we are out of time. So I'm going to ask each of you to give a quick closing statement and to let everybody know where they can find you and stalk you online. Sophie, where can we find you?
You can find me all over Europe. I operate through two companies, Baguette UX, which is based in the UK, and Izenka, a user research consultancy based out of Galway, Ireland. You can find me on Twitter at Wicked Geeky, which will direct you everywhere. And I look forward to all the questions you have following what I said today. If you have any, send them my way. And thank you,
Tweet
Debbie,
at the
for having me, and
Sophie.
Solomon.
Yes, thanks for coming back. Solomon, how do we stalk you most efficiently?
You can find me on LinkedIn. You just search up my name, Solomon O'Nebulum, and you'll see a big giant smiley face. I'm waiting your questions.
Yes, this is the first time we've seen your actual face. We usually see the big giant emoji smiley face. So I'm so happy to see you and meet you in person finally. Well, I'm sure you'll both be back on the show at some point. So we'll think of some reason to drag you both back on for one reason or another. But thanks to both. I10 says, thanks everybody. This was delightful. It was. And Sophie, I hope to see you on the sunny European shores at some point. Solomon, come visit you too. And everybody have a great weekend and join me on Monday when I'll do my first Think Out Loud session and you get to watch me design and explain what I'm doing. Thanks again and have a great weekend, everybody. Bye. Customer centricity as business intelligence. Visit deltacx.com to learn why we are